What a week. I don't know about you, but I'm emotionally drained. The massive shakeup at Microsoft is our top story tonight. CEO Steve Ballmer stepping down after a lackluster career of product flops and missed opportunities. And within minutes of the disgraced CEO's announcement, Microsoft stock soared, which is really kind of rude and hurtful. Now, joining me now for some analysis, we've got Paul Carroll, a partner at the Devil's Advocate Group, Marco Greenberg, founder and CEO of Thunder 11, and Eric Hessedahl, a senior editor at All Things Digital. Well, where to begin? All right, Eric, let's start with you. I'm not sure how we interpret the Ballmer era, a total disaster, honestly, or a guy who managed to retain a 90% monopoly in Microsoft's original business despite huge changes. What side do you fall on?
I fall on the side of saying that Microsoft failed to innovate when the time came. When the Ballmer era began, it was basically what began as the most valuable company in the world, as you said in the setup, has basically fallen to sort of an era of malaise.
Yeah, an era of malaise. Marco, let's look at one chart here. Microsoft under Ballmer versus the S&P 500, okay? So you see what's happened in Microsoft is basically Microsoft over those 20 years or 23 years, it's gone down, 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 whereas the S&P 500, it went up a bit. In fact, we have some figures for you guys. The Ballmer years, while Microsoft fell 42%, NASDAQ fell 6%. Let's remember it had two big crashes in that time. S&P 500 rose 15%. Marco, by definition, is Ballmer a failure?
Ballmer bombed. Ballmer struck out. He was there for 12 years. He stood around for that amount of time, but it was too slow, too copycat-like. Like Eric said, not innovate. Jeff Bezos is on the cover of Fast Company this week. If there was a publication called Slow Company, it would feature Steve.
Oh man, you guys are tough. Now let's go out to Paul Carroll. And Paul, since you're not steeped in this atmosphere of hatred over here in New York and you're way out there out west, let's see if you're going to take a kinder view of the Ballmer era. What do you say?
Well, I do take a longer view. I mean, I've known Steve since 1986, and if you take a look over the whole history, he was the number 2 or number 3 guy in creating a business with $300 billion of market value, and he personally has a net worth of about $11 billion. So that's not bad. But I certainly agree that over the last 15 years, Microsoft has fallen prey to the kind of stuff that they complained about with IBM back when I came in on all of this in 86, and have been just as slow and lackluster in innovation.
Yeah, you know, and guys, by the way, Paul Carroll did write Big Blues, this kind of diagnosis of what went wrong at IBM. And I remember when IBM was getting killed by Microsoft, then Microsoft came along and it got killed by Google, and now wonders whether Google's going to get killed by Facebook. You know, Paul, let's follow up on something, though. I talked to one guy, and we came up with 2 charts of Microsoft's misses, and all 3 of you take a look at this. So the Windows Phone, this is the more recent mishaps. The Windows Phone, it's kind of a bust, right? The Surface tablet, it just resulted in a $900 million loss. We got a chart on this. And the Windows 8, you got to wonder if it was the last straw. I mean, customers just revolted. They hate change. One more thing, guys. Let's look at another set of Microsoft misses. And I want you, Eric, to speak to this. Internet search, you've got Google came along with that. Online music, Apple killed in that. And social net, Facebook. Eric, once a big, fat company like Microsoft misses some of these, does it have to play catch up in those markets, or does it have to try to create an entirely new thing?
Yeah, it's playing catch up and trying to create the new thing. And the question is, what is it? I mean, Microsoft is nowhere in social. Facebook owns that. Twitter owns that. Apple,
too late to catch up?
Late to catch up, not even worth trying. I mean, Google is having trouble catching up with Facebook, so let's just leave that as it is. Microsoft is nowhere in mobile. It was Steve Ballmer who said Apple has no chance of catching market share in the smartphone business.
Oh my God.
And so, you know, go back to that.
And then they ally with Nokia, a corpse.
And then there's one other metric that you have to look back at. I mean, Ballmer presided over the erosion of $330 billion in Microsoft's market cap. It was $600 billion the day before he took over. The day before he announced retirement, it was $269.
But Marco, is that even fair? Because he took over January 2000, and then came the tech bust. The NASDAQ was at 5,000 then. It never even got back close to that. Is this an unrealistic thing we're measuring him against?
Well, there have been a lot of ups and highs in 12 years. And I just want to point out, I do not have this on. It's an iPhone, right? This iPhone generated more income for Apple than all of the income combined for Microsoft. That's an astounding point.
You mean in a single quarter, a single year?
I think in the year.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Is that correct, Eric?
About right to me.
So, look, maybe it's time to go back to Bill Gates. Bill Gates is in the developing world literally saving lives. Maybe it's time he gets more involved, picks a new CEO, and gives some of that founder energy.
Yeah.
So they start thinking like a startup, not like a big battleship.
But Paul Carroll, can any huge multi-billion-dollar company... Now look at this video of Ballmer. Now this is what I love about this man, okay? He is a cheerleader. He is fierce. He is a believer, Paul. He is a super salesman. Look at him. Well, look at him now. Now look at him rant to this Microsoft Salesforce. I love this. Now, Paul, does it turn out, though, that you need some kind of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates visionary to run one of these companies? Why can't you have a super salesman like that?
Oh, you can, and I love Ballmer's energy as well. The thing is, it is hard for big companies. They tend to be dominated by their franchises, like Windows and Office, in the same way that IBM was dominated by the mainframe franchise. If you look in the tech world today, I'd say that Reed Hastings at Netflix and Jeff Bezos are the only two who are consistently able to reinvent their businesses. But the fact is that if you do look around, as I have for a book that's coming out in a couple of months on the new killer apps, there are ways that as a big company you can take a look at what you've done, build on those assets, and move the obstacles out of the way. So it is possible.
Eric, does it turn out that your success in the thing that's hot now is going to stop you from succeeding in the next thing? Is Facebook one day going to get obviated, moved out by the next cool thing?
It's entirely possible. Microsoft suffers from the innovators' dilemmas just as much as any other company. IBM did, the storage companies did beforehand. It's got this established business of Windows and Office and all these other things that continue to generate large amounts of cash, but then the new ideas have a tendency to just kind of get in the way and not be executed well because they're interfering with ability to make money out of the old stuff.
Marco, the bigness and the scale that's part of what makes the company a big hero and beat the world ends up being the thing that drags you down in the third act like a Greek tragedy. How about some real boldness? How about bringing in a total outsider and break up Microsoft, spin off the $6 billion a year consumer business with Zune and the Xbox? What do you say to that?
From a business perspective, it might be a winner. From a marketing brand perspective, let's remember Microsoft is still an iconic brand. So I think if they split it off, a lot of consumers are going to see that as defeat. Instead, I think they should continue to be brutally honest. I don't know if you saw, Eric, but there was a campaign for Internet Explorer in the fall, which said, Internet Explorer sucks. Internet Explorer sucks less. This was produced by Microsoft. In other words, they knew consumer sentiment was against them, and instead they were brutally honest. They need to do more of that to regain the trust of consumers.
Hey, Paul, what do you say? Time to be bolder. Time for an outsider. Time to split up and break up Microsoft.
Oh, I definitely think it's time to go for an outsider, and definitely think it's time to be bolder. In some ways, I think Gerstner was lucky. He came in when he did at IBM, but he certainly was a real breath of fresh air, and I think they could use a Gerstner-like figure at Microsoft.
A Gerstner type of guy with Microsoft, and then Paul will be able to do a sequel to his original Big Blues. And guys, one last note, Paul and I, we used to do 30th birthday parties together back when we both worked at the Wall Street Journal. It was just a few years ago. Hey, you guys are great. Thanks for being with us tonight. Paul, Marco, and Eric.
Thank you very much.
And there's a lot.